Resident Evil 4 changed horror forever. Not just for the series, but the entire genre. Before it came out, horror games were slow, methodical. They felt really heavy. You moved through tight hallways, small rooms, and solved puzzles. You felt fear through stillness, through what you couldn't see. Resident Evil 4, it flipped that on its head. Suddenly, horror wasn't creeping up on you anymore. It was completely just sprinting straight towards you. And it never really stopped. By the late 90s, Resident Evil had already shaped what survival horror looked like. Those first games had set the tone. The fixed cameras, the small spaces, the puzzles, and the slow pacing that just built tension throughout the whole game. That style worked. It gave players atmosphere, mystery, and a sense of being trapped inside something bigger than them. But over time, though, the entire genre began orbiting that same idea. Resident Evil 3 and Code Veronica kept that approach alive, but the surprise was fading. The foundation was strong, but it was starting to get familiar. Everyone understood the rhythm of it, the locked doors, the item puzzles, the deliberate movement. The game still had weight, but the genre was ready for something new. Capcom knew the industry was changing. The next generation of consoles brought faster action and more fluid controls. Developers were starting to chase energy and movement. And for Resident Evil to stay at the front, it had to adapt to that shift. The team wanted something that could stand beside modern design without losing what made the series distinct. That's where Mikami came back in. He understood every piece of what made the early games work, but he was looking at the bigger picture. How to bring that same fear into a new form. He wanted to build something that carried the spirit of survival horror while giving players more presence inside it.
Rain or shine, you're going down.
From 99 to 04, the search for that balance played out through a couple different versions of RE4. One build put Leon in a haunted castle filled with ghosts. Another wrapped the whole world in fog and kinda classic monsters. And then we got one experiment that leaned so far into action it became Devil May Cry. Each version tested a different direction, and each one left behind lessons that helped define what came next. When the final version formed, it felt like everything snapped into focus. The camera shifted to Leon's shoulder, the pacing tightened, and the combat became about control, distance, and reaction. The tension started to come more from motion and from the sense that danger was closing in on all sides.
Lord Sutler.
Mikami's approach didn't erase what came before it. It carried the foundation forward. The core idea stayed the same, survival through limited means. But the feeling changed. Now fear came from being surrounded rather than stranded, from moving through chaos instead of standing still. That creative push gave Resident Evil 4 its life. It was born from experimentation, frustration, and a need to prove that horror could evolve without losing its edge. The team built something faster and more fluid, but still grounded in vulnerability and resourcefulness. This game exists because Capcom refused to let that genre stay comfortable. Every system, camera angle, every design decision came from that same goal: to keep horror alive by teaching it how to move again. And once it did, the rest of the industry followed. When RE4 came out in 2005, the camera was the big thing that caught everyone off guard. The entire game played from this tight, over-the-shoulder perspective, and that's something that people hadn't really seen before. It changed the way you aimed, the way you moved, and even how you felt inside the world. For people who grew up on the classics, the old camera style was its own kind of art. Fixed angles gave every room a distinct mood. You'd step into a hallway and feel watched from somewhere off screen. The camera could hide things just out of view, letting sound carry the fear. You know, a moan from around a corner or footsteps in the hallways. And that built tension of not knowing where it was coming from. That distance built dread. You were never meant to see everything. The approach with RE4, it carried the same tension but in a different way. By placing the camera right behind Leon's shoulder, the game made you feel like you were sharing his space instead of observing it from the outside. It created a sense of connection that kind of tied you to the character and the danger surrounding him. That tension moved inward. It built through how you reacted and how the world pressed in. That closeness carried real power. The camera lined up directly with Leon's movements, letting you see what he saw, the way he saw it. You weren't watching him run anymore, you were there with him. Every swing of an axe or every sound of glass breaking or something, it felt immediate. The fear became something you anticipated. It also changed how you fought. The aiming system was simple. There was no crosshair, just a laser sight hovering where your gun pointed. That single detail pulled you deeper into the moment. You had to steady your aim and feel every shot. It turned gunplay into an act of control, where precision and panic collided in the same heartbeat. From a design perspective, that view created a strange kind of balance. You could see more of the world, but safety didn't follow that. Your field of vision was narrow. Enemies could rush from behind you or from the edges of the screen, forcing you to spin, adjust, and adapt. Every move carried a risk, and danger always felt right next to you. Mikami had once said in an interview, the camera wasn't meant to be revolutionary. It just felt natural. That simplicity is part of what made it so effective. The over-the-shoulder view didn't try to reinvent anything, it simply fit. It gave people a line of sight that matched the rhythm of the combat. When you aimed, it felt like you were holding the weapon yourself. When you turned, the world moved with you. That viewpoint completely redefined third-person design. Developers from Gears of War and all the way to The Last of Us have credited Resident Evil 4 for setting that standard. That perspective blended precision aiming with physical space, and that balance became the foundation for just about every major action and horror game that followed. What made it work so well is that it still carried the soul of survival horror. The game still relied on resource management in some tight areas in the sense that you could be overwhelmed at any second. The camera didn't make the experience easier, it brought the fear within reach. The tension lived in moment and proximity, and how quickly things could collapse around you. When I first played it as a kid, the closeness made me feel like I was right there beside Leon. It wasn't distant anymore, it was shared. The same fight and the same fear and just everything Leon was feeling, that same rush of surviving one more moment. And that sense of connection stuck with me. Even today, when people debate what the best way to frame horror is, there's room for both. Fixed angles hold the mystery of what you can't see. The shoulder view captures the weight of being too close. They reflect two distinct ways of feeling fear, one through distance and the other's through immediacy. Both matter, both work, and both explain why Resident Evil continues to move forward. The shift to that shoulder-level view, it changed everything that came after. It redefined what it meant to experience horror. And once the camera moved that close, the genre never stepped back again. Before we move on, I just want to say, if you made it this far, thank you. I've been looking forward to getting to this one for a pretty long time. Resident Evil 4 is one of those milestones I knew I wanted to cover when I started the series. And it feels good to finally get here. I'm still blown away that this channel has passed 5,000 subscribers in under a year. It's just crazy to me. So, seriously, thank you for all the support. If you've been enjoying the video so far, consider dropping a sub. I'm covering every Resident Evil on the channel, even the side ones. And this is just one part of that journey. And I've already covered quite a few of them already, so check those out if you like this one. And if you were around when this game first came out, or if this was your first Resident Evil, I'd love to hear what you thought of it in the comments. And for the mobile viewers, there's this little hype button now. If hitting that directly helps the channel grow, it gives the video hype points, which basically tells YouTube, hey, people are into this, show it to more people. It only works within the first 7 days of the video's life, so if you're watching it early, that hype click makes a big difference. And if you're catching this a bit later than 7 days, a simple like still goes a long way. But a huge shout out to the Just Tank, Seth Squatch, and Noob Kroll for the super chats during the Resident Evil 4 stream. You guys are awesome. I always stream the upcoming project before it drops, so if you ever want to hang out live, keep an eye out for those. I usually go live in the evenings. There's also a Discord if you'd like to hang out and chat. The link for it's pinned in the comment. And if the invite link breaks after so long, just let me know and I'll get you another one. But alright, let's get back to RE4. RE4's combat to me feels like chaos under control. Every fight moves with rhythm. There's a pattern of aim, stagger, kick, reload, and repeat. It's fast, but every action still demands thought. You can't just pull the trigger and hope for the best. You have to feel the fight, think about your spacing, and use what the game gives you to survive. The magic comes from how responsive everything feels. Enemies don't just absorb bullets, they react. You shoot a villager in the leg and he buckles, clutching at it before pushing forward again. You land a shot to the arm and he drops his weapon. Hit the head and there's a split second of hesitation. The moment where you decide if it's safe to close in for a kick. It's not just shooting, it's reading body language, finding openings, and chaining reactions together into motion. That's where the rhythm I was talking about comes from. Each encounter becomes a small survival puzzle. You're not just thinking about enemies, you're thinking about angles, distance, and crowd control. A stagger opens a window to kick, a kick clears space, and that space gives you a second to reload or reposition. It's this constant loop of creating and managing pressure. When you get surrounded, it becomes a test of calm under panic. Do you focus on the guy closest to you, or the one carrying the pitchfork behind him? Do you drop someone to their knees so you can suplex them, or do you get a headshot and risk a parasite bursting out? Every choice changes the tempo. You start playing by instinct, controlling chaos, but only just. That sense of rhythm carries into the tools you use too. The shotgun becomes a reset button, blowing back a wall of enemies and giving you a moment to breathe. Grenades are timing tools, flashes to instantly wipe out a Las Plagas, or frags to buy seconds from space. Every item matters. Even the inventory feels alive in this system. The attaché case, it turns organization into its own kind of ritual. Between fights, you stop and sort. For me, it's weapons in the top left, ammo top right, herbs in the corner, and grenades in the other corner. It's all lined up just right. It's neat, clean, and intentional. You know where everything is, and that order gives you control in a world built to take it from you. For a lot of players, this is probably where the obsession started. There's something calming about opening that case and seeing everything in its place. A small act of control before you're thrown back into chaos. The flow between combat and inventory, it builds a rhythm of tension and relief. In one moment you're surrounded, every sound overlapping and your aim shaking with pressure. The next, you're in silence, rotating items, hearing the soft clicks of your inventory menu. It's breathing space, but it's also preparation, because you know the next fight could start seconds later.
Women.
The enemies are built to push you, not just to scare you. They move together, they flank from the sides, and respond differently to every shot you take. You start learning enemy behaviors, which demand a specific weapon. Over time, you build habits. That enemy's coming, grab that flashbang. That one has a shield, switch to the shotgun. It feels tactical, but never slow. Every encounter becomes a test of knowledge and composure, not just luck. That's what makes RE4's combat so timeless. It's not just action, it's tension and motion. The fear doesn't come from being powerless, it comes from knowing exactly how much power you have and how fast you can lose it. You're always a second away from being overwhelmed, but that's the thrill of it. The constant balance between order and panic, between rhythm and noise. The deeper you go, the more it feels like a dance you're barely keeping up with. Each fight has its own beat, and when you hit that flow, it's almost hypnotic. You stop thinking about it as shooting or surviving. You're just reacting, adjusting, and surviving by instinct. It's fear turned into focus. RE4 turned combat into a living rhythm, something that demands skill but feeds off tension. It's not about power or helplessness. It's about that narrow space between them, the heartbeat where control and fear exist at the same time. That's the loop, chaos, rhythm, and survival all moving at once. RE4 isn't just one kind of horror, it's three. The village, the castle, and the island, each one built around a different kind of fear. The village feels like old world folk horror, born from superstition and decay. The castle dives into cult and ceremony, almost fantasy horror. The island turns cold and mechanical, trading faith for flesh, almost like industrial horror. The village is where it all begins though, and it's where the game feels closest to survival horror in its rawest form. You step into this broken place surrounded by farmland, mist, and silence. Everything looks normal for a second, but something's off. The air is heavy, you can tell the people here used to live quiet lives, but those lives have been replaced by something else. The homes are rotting, the tools are rusted, and the eyes of everyone you meet are hollow. It's not a haunted house or a science lab, it's a village, a real living place. That's what makes it so unnerving. The horror here doesn't come from the supernatural. It comes from people who've lost themselves completely. They're not mindless zombies, but they're not human either. They speak, they work together, they hunt in groups. You can hear them muttering prayers under their breath, talking to each other as they close in. It's the kind of fear that comes from being surrounded by what looks familiar but doesn't feel right anymore.
Son of a...
That's where the game's folk horror roots start to show. The village is isolated from the rest of the world. It's steeped in ritual and controlled by belief. The people have been consumed by the Las Plagas, a parasite that doesn't just kill its host, it rewires them. They move like a hive, obeying unseen orders. They till fields, guard paths, and carry on with routine while something ancient breathes inside them. That mix of normal and corrupted gives the whole area a sick sense of realism. It feels like you're walking through a place that existed long before you arrived, a community that's been rotting for years under something it can't understand. The design of this section makes sure you feel that way. The paths loop back on themselves, the homes are tight and claustrophobic, built too close together. Every sound echoes between the walls. The doors creak and the footsteps scraping through the mud, voices chanting somewhere in the distance. You can't see them all the time, but you know they see you. And then it happens, the moment everyone remembers. You step into the heart of the village and everything comes alive. The bells ring, the villagers pour out of the homes and barns, and suddenly you're surrounded. It's not a scripted cutscene, you're in control, but the game feels like it's swallowing you whole. Every door you try just leads into a dead end, or every corner leads to another wave. You grab what you can, jump through windows, block the doors, shoot until the chamber's empty, but the panic hits instantly. It's not about being chased by a monster, it's about realizing the entire town has turned against you. This sequence is pure dread through motion. It's a perfect storm of mechanics and atmosphere. The hit reactions, the crowd movement, the sound design, all of it builds into something cinematic without ever taking control away. You can feel the game testing how long you can hold your ground before instinct takes over. You kick ladders down, throw a grenade, reload, run again. Every second is survival stretched thin. The first siege defines the rest of the game. It teaches you what Resident Evil 4 really is, not a slow crawl through hallways, but a constant fight for space. Every encounter after that moment carries the same energy. The fear is now about being cornered in plain sight. The village embodies primal fear, the fear of being surrounded, the fear of a crowd that moves like one mind, the fear of being the only one left who still knows what's real. It's isolation dressed in daylight. There's no darkness to hide behind, no safety in the silence. Just the echo of that church bell and the sound of footsteps closing in from every direction. Resident Evil 4's village isn't just a location, it's a warning. It shows how fragile control really is, how quickly routine can turn violent, and how easily normal people can become something else when something older takes hold. It's horror through community and through ritual, through the breakdown of what we recognize as human. And when that last villager falls and the bell rings again, they all just stop. They walk away like nothing happened, shuffling towards the bell. You stand there in the dirt, Leon's breathing heavy and he's surrounded by dead bodies, and you realize something. You survived the first test, but you haven't escaped anything. The village isn't just where the story begins, it's where you start to realize this is a different kind of fear. When you leave the village and step into the castle, the tone shifts immediately, and the fear changes shape. The dirt roads and the wooden houses turn into stone walls and these long hallways. It's still survival horror, but now it's layered with ceremony. The world feels deliberate, built around purpose and ritual. This is Salazar's castle. It's a fortress and a temple at the same time. Every wall, statue, and candle feels like it's part of a system that's been running for generations. The people here don't just follow orders, they believe in something. The cult of the Los Illuminados. It isn't hiding what it is. It wants to be seen. The chants, the robes, the symbols carved into the walls, they all show that you've entered a place ruled by faith. That's what makes the castle so uncomfortable. You're surrounded by people who see infection as holy. The air is heavy and the whole castle seems to just listen to you. You're walking through the center of a belief that's too old and too deep to reason with. Every encounter feels like part of a ceremony already in progress. The design of the castle leans into that feeling. The rooms are larger now, filled with banners and elaborate traps. There's a rhythm to how you move through them. You solve a puzzle to open a gate, walk through a hall that feels super quiet, in a different way than the village, and then face an ambush timed to perfection. It's a steady loop of tension and release, like the game is conducting its own ritual while you play through it. The puzzles reinforce that sense of structure. They're ornate, and they're built from moving emblems or switches or fire-based mechanisms. They exist to make you feel like you're taking part in the cult's world. Every lever you pull or puzzle you solve feels like an act that belongs to the space, not just a game mechanic. It's a small touch that keeps you grounded in the setting. And then there's Salazar himself. He's not just another boss, he's the voice of the castle. Every line he throws at you feels rehearsed and theatrical. He hides behind ceremony because that's where his control lives. You can feel him trying to maintain that control as you tear through each wing of his home. The enemies reflect that tone. The robed cultists move together in groups. They chant as they attack, sometimes charging, sometimes keeping distance. Armored zealots move slow and steady, forcing you to plan your shots. The Navistadors are invisible, the insect creatures. They break that pattern completely and make you rethink the space you're in. The castle shifts between order and unpredictability, pushing you to stay sharp. And the combat feels tighter here. You've built confidence since the village, but every fight still demands awareness. The long hallways and the balconies mean you're always checking angles. You'll start to recognize the rhythm, isolate a target, and stagger, reposition, repeat. The moment you relax, something changes. Maybe a second group enters from behind, or a hidden archer lands a shot you didn't expect. The game keeps you aware that control can slip away at any time. And Leon's tone fits this section perfectly. He's serious, but the quips start to come out more often. They aren't jokes for the player, they're coping mechanisms. Every line feels like him trying to keep his nerves steady, in a place that thrives on ritual and fear. It gives the story a grounded balance that keeps his humanity visible.
No! Leon!
Where's the satisfying sound of one's impalement?
Don't fall for this old trick.
The deeper you go, the more the castle reveals about the cult. You find torture rooms, relic chambers, and altars built to honor Las Plagas. You start to see how belief has replaced logic. These people didn't just get infected, they chose to serve. The parasite might have started it, but the faith keeps it alive. And from a gameplay perspective, the castle tests how well you've learned to manage pressure. Ammo still matters, space still matters. Every room is built to make you think about movement, and where to stand, where to hold ground, where to retreat. The structure rewards calm thinking under pressure and punishes panic. And by the time you reach Salazar, you understand what the castle represents. It isn't about wealth or power, it's about devotion and control. Every room and every enemy reinforces that. You're not just clearing an area, you're dismantling a system that believes in its own corruption. And when it finally collapses, it doesn't feel like victory, it feels like breaking a cycle that's been running for centuries. The castle is where belief becomes the enemy, where faith turns into design, where survival becomes an act of defiance, one step at a time, through a place built to make you kneel.
Monsters. Guess after this there'll be one less to worry about.
The island is where everything changes again. It's the final stretch, and by the time you get here, the atmosphere again feels different. The fog and firelight from earlier are gone. Now it's all steel walls, floodlights, and alarms. You're walking into a place built for control, not worship. And up to this point, everything in the game has been pretty personal. The village felt human, the castle felt ceremonial. The island feels mechanical. The people here aren't villagers or cult members anymore. They're soldiers. They move with purpose, use tactics, and speak in orders. The fear comes from being trapped inside a system that runs on efficiency. The setting reflects that idea perfectly. You move through labs, bunkers, and holding cells filled with failed experiments. There are medical tables, monitors, and equipment scattered everywhere. Everything just looks metal and cold, and the horror lives inside that precision. This is where the parasite stopped being a curse and became a science project. The regenerators show that best. They're one of the most memorable enemies in the series for a reason. You hear them before you can see them. There's a slow, wet breathing that echoes on the other side of a door. When one finally appears, it barely reacts, it just walks towards you, calm and steady, like it knows that it doesn't have to be fast. Because shooting it doesn't stop it. The body just falls apart and then regrows limbs in seconds. The only way to end it is by finding the parasites inside it and taking them out one at a time. That mechanic changes how you play. The thermal scope lets you see the weak points inside their bodies, turning each fight into a mix of strategy and panic. You line up a shot, hold your breath, and hope it drops before it reaches you. It's methodical, and every encounter feels like a small puzzle under pressure. The soldiers on the island add another kind of challenge. They're better organized, they use cover, they fight in groups. They use heavier weaponry. It forces you to keep moving and pick your targets carefully. The game takes all the tools you build up and makes you prove you can handle them. Everything here runs on coordination. The layout adds to the pressure. The rooms are really tight, connected by metal walkways and narrow hallways. You'll see lasers, turrets, and mounted guns. It all feels designed to remind you that this place was made for production. The whole island runs like a machine, and you're the one piece that doesn't belong. The sound design keeps that pressure steady. You hear machinery humming through the walls and gears turning, alarms echoing in the distance. Every step bounces off the metal. The constant noise builds that feeling of being inside something that never stops working. The island never sleeps. The combat loop stays intense. The ammo still matters and positioning still matters. Every room is built for short bursts of violence followed by quiet cleanup. You'll check your case more often here than anywhere else in the game. Healing items, grenades, ammo, everything has to stay in order. That sense of organization becomes its own form of survival. Thematically, this is where Resident Evil 4 brings everything together. The village showed what fear looks like when it's primal. The castle showed how belief turns it into ritual. The island shows how fear becomes process. The people here stopped believing a long time ago, and they just follow the system without question. When you finally destroy the facility, it doesn't feel like a triumph. It feels like shutting down a machine that's been running for too long. Every switch you pull, an explosion you trigger, feels like undoing something that should never have existed. The island is the coldest part of Resident Evil 4. It's where humanity disappears completely, where the infection becomes system and structure. The story ends with survival turning into resistance. The island brings that fear to its breaking point, and once it's over, all that's left is to understand what it was really about, who built it, why it existed, and how it connects to everything that came before. That's where the story comes together, and where the real weight of Resident Evil 4 starts to show. The game takes place 6 years after the Raccoon City incident. The Umbrella Corporation's fallen, and the world has started to move on. And our boy Leon, one of the survivors from RE2, now works for the United States government as a special agent. His first major assignment sends him deep into rural Spain to find the president's missing daughter, Ashley Graham. The mission begins on the edge of a forgotten village surrounded by forests and the farmlands. Everything feels isolated, like I've said. The people who live there barely speak, and when they do, their words sound practiced. And Leon finds out it isn't a simple kidnapping. The villagers serve a cult called Los Luminados, a group built on devotion to an ancient parasite known as Las Plagas. Las Plagas lives inside its host and replaces thought with obedience. It doesn't rot flesh like the T-virus. It keeps its victims alive, aware, and capable. The infection spreads through ritual and control. Each villager follows orders as if part of a single mind. The parasite's leaders claim this unity as faith. They believe submission brings purity. Osmond Sadler stands at the top of this belief system. He uses Las Plagas to command his followers and dreams of spreading that control across the world. His visions isn't chaos or destruction. It's order through infection, every choice, every body moving in sync under his will. The castle and the island both serve as the foundation for the plan. The castle belongs to Ramon Salazar. He's a descendant of the family that once ruled the region. Salazar's unearthed the parasite centuries ago and sealed them underground after seeing what they could do. Generations later, Ramon broke that seal. He aligned with Sadler and offered his family's estate as the cult's new home. His faith turned the castle into a temple where the parasite could flourish again. And then beyond the castle was the island, a research facility where science replaced worship. Here, the cult's goals are refined through experimentation. Soldiers, test subjects, and failed mutations fill the island. Las Plagas becomes something manufactured instead of worshipped. The infection turns into a tool. Throughout the game, Leon crosses paths with people we've seen before. Ada Wong returns operating under her own agenda tied to a rival organization seeking the parasite for its power. Luis Serra, he's a former researcher. He guides Leon through a lot of the story. He helped develop Las Plagas before turning against Sadler, hoping to undo what he had helped create. Both characters bring humanity into a world built around manipulation. And then Ashley becomes more than just a mission objective. Her presence changes how Leon moves through the world. Protecting her shapes every encounter, every room, and every decision. She represents what's still worth saving in a place where control has replaced choice. The infection spreads through hierarchy. Saddler controls Salazar and his soldiers. They control the villagers. The villagers maintain the illusion of normal life while serving a single will. It's a structure built on obedience that mirrors the system of Umbrella, another machine that's consumed everything in its path. From the series, RE4 expands the lore beyond bioweapons and laboratories. Las Plagas isn't born from science alone, it's an ancient organism with its own history and purpose. It connects to the natural world, to religion, and to the idea of submission as strength. The game shifts the conversation from infection as disaster to infection as design. Leon's story becomes a reflection of that theme. He's a survivor of chaos forced to face control. Every location tests how far he'll go to protect his mission without losing himself to the system surrounding him. He's still the man who escaped Raccoon City, but now he's older, he's trained, and aware of how thin the line is between survival and obedience. When the facility finally falls and Saddler is defeated, the victory feels restrained. The world outside remains fragile, and the parasite still exists. Resident Evil 4 closes with the sense that this cycle will continue in new forms. The fall of Umbrella didn't end the pursuit of power, it only changed its shape. The lore that begins here defines a lot of what follows in the series. Las Plagas reappears in later entries, shaping organizations and experiments far beyond the village. Its legacy proves that control, once discovered, never disappears. It simply waits to be used again. RE4's story stands at the intersection of science, faith, and human ambition. It shows how belief in biology can merge into something that feels unstoppable.
She really pushed it.
Here, catch. Better get a move on. See you around.
It isn't just all about monsters or zombies. It's a story about what happens when people choose order over freedom, and how easily survival can turn into surrender. The real legacy of Resident Evil 4 is how completely it reshaped what horror could look like in games. It didn't just keep the series alive, it gave the entire genre a new direction. Everything that came after, from Dead Space to Gears of War, carries some part of what this game created. When Resident Evil 4 launched in 2005, it felt like a turning point. Survival horror had started to slow down, the fixed camera and tank controls era had done its job, but players were ready for something that moved faster and hit harder. RE4 arrived right at that moment, showing how tension could live inside motion. The camera followed close behind Leon's shoulder, and that simple decision became the foundation for an entire generation of games. Developers all over the world took notice, and Gears of War used that same viewpoint as the base for its design. Dead Space followed it soon after, taking the precision aiming and layered dread of RE4 and rebuilding it in space. Even games that weren't as purely horror like The Last of Us pulled from its pacing, structure, and tone. That perspective became a standard. It made third-person games feel immediate, physical, and grounded in a way that players hadn't experienced before. The structure of RE4 became a blueprint too. The 3-act flow, village, castle, island. It gave developers a clear rhythm to build from. Each area escalated tone, scale, and intensity without ever losing focus. The first act captured panic and survival, the second turned it into a ritual and control, and the third brought it all to a point of mechanical fear. That format still shows up today. You can see its fingerprints on how modern games pace themselves, alternating between quiet build-up and overwhelming release. What made RE4 stand out was how it changed the kind of fear you felt. The series had always been about vulnerability, about running from what you couldn't handle. RE4 taught players to stand their ground and manage the fear through precision and awareness. Every encounter felt like a test of control. Ammo mattered, positioning mattered, and every kick and reload mattered. The fear didn't come from being powerless, it came from knowing that one mistake could break your rhythm. The reaction when it came out was absolutely massive. It earned near perfect scores across the board and won Game of the Year from outlets all over the world. People aside from a few were amazed that something this intense could still feel like Resident Evil. The pacing, the sound, the way the camera worked, it all clicked. The game sold millions. It became one of Capcom's highest sellers, and kept growing with every port and re-release that followed. It wasn't just a success, it was a reset button for the entire franchise. And over time, that influence became both a gift and a challenge. The style RE4 created was so effective that it reshaped the whole industry. The next generation leaned heavier into action. Resident Evil 5 and 6 followed that formula, but pushed further into spectacle. showing how easily that balance between fear and control could shift. It proved how fine that line was. Too slow and you lose the momentum, but too fast and you lose the tension. Even with that shift, the impact never faded. RE4 is still brought up whenever people talk about the most important game ever made. It's compared to things like Doom and Super Mario 64. Games that didn't just succeed, but redefined what their genre could be. Every new remake, every third-person horror game that builds its tension through proximity owes something to Resident Evil 4. RE4 didn't just modernize horror, it reshaped how fear works in motion altogether. It turned survival into rhythm, and dread into awareness, and action into something that can still make you nervous. That's the legacy it left behind.
Prepare for your death, Leon.
A game that proved horror could evolve without losing its soul, and a reminder that even after 20 years, the genre is still living in the shadow of what this one game created. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you. I've been really looking forward to covering this one, and it means a lot that you stuck around through the whole video. RE4 is one of those games that shaped everything that came after, and getting to revisit it as part of the series has been something special. If you enjoyed it, consider dropping a sub, leaving a like, and letting me know down in the comments what Resident Evil 4 meant to you. Was this your first Resident Evil game, or were you already deep into the series before this one came along? Always love reading what these games meant to everybody. Also down in the pinned comment, there's a link to the full Resident Evil playlist. I've already covered quite a few of the games in the series, and I'm working my way through every single one, including the side games. There's also a link to the Discord. If you'd like to hang out and chat, I'm in there pretty often. You can also make requests in there. But I just want to say again how much I appreciate all the support this channel's gotten lately, the growth, the feedback, everything. It's all been incredible, and it really does push me to keep going. But, as always, I'll see y'all later.
Got something that might interest you. What are you buying?